Welcome to another edition of Uncle Henny's Campfire Stories, where we're going to read some family-friendly, scary stories and hang out, crack wise, and I guess remain socially distant, but only in the physical manner. So we got some good stories for you this week. We've got good stories for you every week, but today we'll be finishing off still more scary stories for sleepovers, and then moving to another, which is, of course, even more scary stories for sleepovers. So, but first, let's see how you guys are doing in the chat. Morgan Moore said, hello? Where did it go? I'll try it over here. Okay, let's see. Morgan Moore said, evening. Good evening, sir. Craig Cohen said, hello, how are you doing, Henrik? I am doing very well, my friend, and thank you for being our number one tipper tonight. As you can tell on the bottom of the screen, there is a request for tips, but it is not required, it's just appreciated. What I do require is, if you don't mind, hit the share button and let people join us to hang out tonight. Tony Marr said, party! And Jeff McClellan said, good evening, sir. Good evening to you too, my friend. I've got a lot of cool news. For those who tuned in last week, we've been reading for, I don't know how many weeks now, 13 weeks, 14 weeks? We've been reading books from the series Scary Stories for Sleepovers. And I had books 1 through 9. Which all, to be completely transparent, all of these books cost between $4 and $7. So they're very affordable. They were popular in the 90s. They were, in every library. And now, heartbreakingly, they've been kind of forgotten. But I refuse to forget such kitsch. But, for whatever reason, Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 10 just wasn't out there as much. Therefore, very few copies. In fact, the one copy I could find of Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 10 was $57. But last week, you guys contributed lots of tips, and I put in a little bit of my own money, and I obtained Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 10, the rarest of all of the books, and valuable only to myself and an obsessive group of weirdos that I call my friends. Let's see what else you're saying in the chat. Morgan Moore, were you able to get anything you wanted from the Severin sale? I ordered all 3 Lucio Fulci movies, including Fulci for Fake, Enigma, and the other one that is escaping my mind right now, Demonia, I think it was. I was able to get all 3 of those, and I emailed in an additional order, which I will eventually get, confirmation for. But I kind of went hog wild, especially when they were having all those internet problems and all those website problems. It seemed like the angrier people got at Severin, the more I wanted to give them some of my dough. So I look forward to getting those soon. So I reckon we can start the final story of the Still More Scary Stories for Sleepovers book. If y'all are ready, I think I'm ready. I believe, yep, this is the second to last, sorry. These are the 2 final stories in this book. So here we go, my friends. Get comfortable, gather around the fire. This story is called The Snow Cave. Belinda's dad pulled the car into the parking space in front of the general store. Okay, honey, he said. I'm going to get some supplies and order the wood we need for the whole 2 weeks we'll be in the cabin. They're predicting snow and will appreciate a nice warm fire. Sounds great, Dad, she agreed. Can I take a walk with Shiloh? Sure, but don't go too far and zip up your jacket, he called after her. It's getting pretty cold. Belinda clipped Shiloh's leash onto his collar and opened the car door. The excited husky bounded out and stood beside the truck, his tail wagging. Together, Belinda and Shiloh strolled along the sidewalk, looking in the shop windows. When they returned, 2 gray-haired men were sitting on wooden chairs outside of the general store. That's a fine animal, one of the men said. Shiloh took a liking to the man right away and waited to be petted. Are you the young lady whose folks rented the Rogers cabin? Yes, sir, she answered. If there's enough snow, my dad is going to teach me to ski. If there is too much, the second man said seriously, you could get more than you bargained for. I beg your pardon? Belinda tilted her head in question. Don't mind old Frank, the first man, whose name was Willis, advised. He's just afraid of the snowman. Belinda laughed. Afraid of a snowman? The smile disappeared from Willis's face. We're not talking about a ball of snow with a carrot nose and a top hat. Have you ever heard of the Yeti? Belinda nodded. They're huge ape-like creatures in the mountains in Asia, but it's only a legend. Willis leaned back in his chair. According to a local Indian legend, something like the Yeti once lived in these mountains. Maybe it still does. The man's eyes twinkled. There's a chain of underground caves around here, with several different openings to the surface. Nobody knows just how far back they go, or what might be living in them. Belinda was now fascinated. If there are snow creatures here, why hasn't anyone seen them? Frank took a long drag on his pipe and let the smoke slowly curl from his lips. Maybe some people did. Back in '39, when we were kids, we used to play up at that ridge where the Rogers cabin stands now. It was a good hill for sledding. One weekend, there was a real heavy snowfall. All we wanted was to have fun. His voice faltered and his face clouded over, as if the memory of that weekend was painful. One of our group, said Willis, picking up the story, was a boy named Wally. Somehow, Wally got lost, just disappeared. Some folks figured they'd find the body in spring, but they never did. All we ever found was one of his red mittens and his broken sled, with deep scratches in it, like claw marks. Willis glanced at Frank. There are a few who think a Yeti got him. According to the legend, they come to the surface to hunt when there's a lot of snow. And isn't it strange, Frank added, that every time we have a major snowfall, some hiker or skier suddenly disappears? No body, no nothing. Has anyone disappeared lately? Belinda asked. No, but we haven't had much snow for 8 years now. The door of the general store swung open and Belinda's dad stepped out with 2 large grocery bags. He placed them in the trunk of the car and joined Belinda and the men. Might one of you fellas be Willis? He asked. Willis nodded. That's me. I'm Joe McGowan, Belinda's dad said, smiling. They told me inside to check with you about getting the wood delivered to the cabin. Sure, no problem, Willis answered. Frank and I'll get it loaded in the truck and I'll bring it up shortly. That'll be fine, Mr. McGowan said, then turned to Belinda. Come on, honey, we're all set. If we don't get back to the cabin soon, your mom will start to get worried. As they got into the van, it began to snow. Belinda told her dad about the legend. He laughed. Well, I can't say that I believe in snow monsters, but there is a good point to the story. These woods can be dangerous, and people can easily get lost. Belinda buried her fingers in Shiloh's thick coat. I don't have to worry as long as Shiloh's with me, she said. Isn't that right, boy? Shiloh answered by licking her ear. It wasn't a long drive, but by the time they got to the cabin, the snow was piling up. Within an hour, Willis arrived with the firewood, and Belinda and her dad helped him unload it. Belinda's mom made them all a hot cup of cocoa, which they drank in the living room in front of a warm fire. After a while, Willis set down his cup. I don't mean to rush off, he said as he pulled on his jacket, but it looks like the weather's getting worse. I think I'd best get back to town. We haven't had this much snow in a long time. Belinda glanced out the window at the darkening landscape. As if he knew what she was thinking, Willis laughed. Don't be concerned, little lady. The storm will blow over by tomorrow. He trudged out into the snow, then stopped and called back over his shoulder. If you folks need anything, just call down to the general store. Willis was wrong. It snowed the whole night and through the next day and night too. The report on the radio said it was the most snow that had fallen in 30 years. The following day the clouds cleared, the air was cold and crisp, and huge snowdrifts glistened in the winter sunshine. Belinda was too excited to think about snow monsters. Her dad had rented 3 large inner tubes that were perfect for sliding downhill. Belinda dressed warmly. Her parents had taught her to respect nature and prepare for anything, so she also packed a few supplies in a fanny pack. It took some time for the family to work their way up through the soft snow to the top of the ridge behind the cabin, but it was worth it. There was a long, wide clearing on the hill with dense forest on each side. Soon Belinda and her parents were taking turns whizzing down the open patch of hillside in their rubber tubes, then scrambling back up again for another ride. Each time Belinda swooshed downward, Shiloh raced along behind. He barked and tumbled in the snow, seeming to really enjoy the game. "Whew!" Belinda's mom exclaimed as they scrunched up the hill together. "I think I've had enough." "Oh, Mom, just one more ride," Belinda begged. "Why don't we all race to the bottom of the hill?" "Okay," her dad said. "Last one to the bottom is a rotten egg." He took off, laughing. Belinda and her mom each belly flopped onto their tubes and raced after him. Belinda was a little behind when her tube hit a patch of icy snow and veered off to the right. She tried to correct the turn, but she was going too fast. The tube sped in along the trees and headed for a huge pine. Belinda tumbled off the tube and rolled into a big drift of snow. Helpless, she slid downward, picking up speed toward a wide, flat rock that stuck up out of the drift. She curled in her legs and covered her head with her arms, expecting to crash. But instead of hitting the rock, she slid through a small opening beneath it. She slid further into the darkness, then felt herself tumble over a ledge and fall about 5 feet straight down. Screaming into the nothingness, Belinda finally came to an abrupt stop on cold, hard ground. Then everything went black. At first, when she came to, Belinda thought that she had been dreaming. But as soon as she moved, she knew it was all real. Nothing seemed to be broken, but she was sore all over. If it hadn't been for her layers of padded winter clothing, she would surely have been seriously hurt by the fall. She reached under her jacket and was relieved to find that the fanny pack was still strapped to her waist. Fumbling a little in the inky blackness, she pulled out her small flashlight, clicked it on, and surveyed her surroundings. "Wow," she said to herself. "What is this place?" The beam of light revealed a large cave with several tunnels leading from it. She moved the light up and saw an opening above her and realized that she had fallen through it. Slowly, she stood up and rubbed her sore legs. The opening was just a little out of reach. She looked around to see if there was anything to stand on. The cave was empty. "Hello!" she called out. "Hello! I'm down here! Can anybody hear me?" There was no answer. How long had she been down there? She realized that her parents must be searching for her, but they probably had not seen her careen off into the forest. How would they find her? "There must be another way out," she murmured, remembering that what Willis had said about the caves and how there were several openings to the surface. She tried not to think about the other things he had told her. Taking a deep breath, Belinda chose one of the tunnels and entered it. In some places, she had to duck way down and crawl. She had the feeling that she was heading further down, but where else could she go? She had to try it. Finally, the passage opened up into another wide cavern. Belinda shone the flashlight around and noted that there were other tunnels. Then her foot kicked something. She turned the beam on it and screamed at the empty eye socket staring blindly at her. It was a human skull. In horror, Belinda moved the flashlight beam a little further and saw that the skull was attached to other bones that had once been the body of a child. And worst of all, the skeleton had a single red mitten on one hand. "Wally!" she cried, not hearing the muffled footsteps slipping up behind her in the dark. Then, all at once, she felt a presence. Slowly, she turned and saw a horrible monster in the glare of her flashlight. It was a huge beast covered with stiff, white fur. It had enormous, bloodshot eyes and a snarling mouth full of sharp, yellow fangs. Roaring in anger, the creature slashed at Belinda with its thick, bear-like claws. She ducked the blow and dashed for another tunnel. Her heart pounding, she sprinted along the twisting passage and, bursting into an open space, saw the very same skeleton she had seen before. "The tunnels must be interconnected," she whispered frantically. "I'm going in circles." Although she had no idea where the beast might be, Belinda tried another entrance and stumbled along, drawing in the stale air in ragged gasps. After what seemed like ages, she found herself, once again, in the same horrible chamber. Without hesitating, she dashed into another tunnel. This time she seemed to be climbing, perhaps toward the surface. The thought gave her courage and she ran faster. Then, suddenly, she stumbled. Grabbing an outcrop of rock, she managed to stop her fall. She shone her flashlight ahead and saw that she was actually at the rim of some sort of ledge. One side of the tunnel dropped away into a deep, wide crevasse. As she tried to see how far along the path the crevasse ran, her flashlight dimmed and slowly faded out. Belinda's heart sank. Now she was completely enveloped in darkness. The hairs stood up on the back of her neck as she heard the echoing sound of a low snarl. Where was it coming from? How close was it? She set her jaw in determination. She was not going to just sit and wait for the snow monster to find her. Instead, she dropped to her knees and carefully felt her way along the path. I will get out, she said to herself. To keep her spirits up, she thought of Shiloh. For a moment, she smiled as she remembered his excited bark. It seemed that she could actually hear it. Wait a minute, Belinda said aloud as she straightened up. I do hear it. She strained her ears. Shiloh? Now she could hear voices, too. Human voices. Belinda? Her dad called. Dad, I'm over here, she cried. Slowly, the tunnel brightened. A moment later, her father and another man turned a corner with Shiloh leading them. Dad! Belinda jumped to her feet and ran toward them. But with a blood-curdling snarl, the snow monster leaped from a side tunnel. Inches away from her, it raised its claws, then suddenly cried out in agony. Shiloh had raced ahead and sunk his teeth into the beast's leg. The hideous monster twisted clumsily to strike at the dog, but Shiloh held on as the savage snow creature toppled and fell, howling into the crevasse. Shiloh, let go! Belinda screamed as she threw herself forward and grabbed Shiloh to stop him from falling with the monster. Belinda's dad reached them and scooped her up in his arms. It's okay, baby, he said comfortingly. We're getting out of here. A little later, Belinda awoke in her own bed. Her mother was sitting at her side, and Shiloh was stretched out on the floor, chewing on a big, meaty bone. Mom? Belinda sat up. Was it a dream? No, honey, her mother said, hugging her tightly. How did you find me? Belinda's mother smiled down at the husky at her feet. Shiloh led us to the spot where you disappeared. It was too small for us to get through, so we had to get help. Once we were able to widen the opening, Shiloh led the rescue party to you. Many townspeople came to help. There was a knock at the door, and Willis poked his head inside. I came to see if you were all right, he said gently. I'm fine. Now, Belinda said. Is the monster dead? We can only hope so, Willis answered. He stood near the window, watching the first flakes of a new snowstorm. Shiloh lifted his head and turned his gaze to the window, too. Then he drew back his lips slightly to show his front fangs, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. It's okay, boy, Belinda soothed. But then, of course, Belinda couldn't pick up the scent of the creature that stood at the edge of the woods, staring toward the cabin with enormous, bloodshot eyes. That was a good one. And not only did it give me goosebumps, but it had a good boy in it. Nothing makes a story great quite like having a good boy in it. So let's see what you... That was so fun. That was so fun. Let's go, Shiloh. Let's go. Real quick, I want to say a big thank you to Shane Migliavacca for sending me a very generous tip. Thank you so much. Tipping is not mandatory, but it is hugely appreciated. Let's see what you guys are saying. And speaking of tipping, remember, no tip is too small. If you feel the need, I do appreciate it. Unfortunately, I just got word today that another job I had lined up in August has been canceled due to, I'm sure you can guess why. So any help is appreciated. Dwayne West, I'm tuned in for another spooky evening, friend. Glad to have you there. Shimigliavaka, this week's lesson, never take a snowy vacation. Alex Harker said, suh. Tony Marr, fanny packs, the perfect survival tool. Shane Migliavacca, them bones, them dry bones. Well, he just said them bones, but I got what he was laying down. Dwayne West, yes, a child murdered, finally. I know it took so long, right? Raymond Lawson said, I'm scared. Hey, you're not the only one. Morgan Moore said, best puppy. And Craig Cohen said, good dog. Henwolf would have done the same for you. How is Henwolf? So Wolfie is doing very well. I call her Wolfie. For those who like hang out at my house and stuff, I pretty much exclusively call her Wolfie. You know, unless I'm mad at her. Then I'm like, Henwolf Rutherford Kuto, what did you do? Wolfie, Henwolf is doing very well. Today, actually, she went to see the vet to have the final 2 staples removed from her neck, which we put in there just to be safe because the wound reopened a little bit from having a couple of non-cancerous tumors removed. The staples are out now. She is doing very well. She is at her optimal Henwolfness. I actually put a kiddie pool out in the backyard because I just got tired of how hot it was and tired of sitting in my living room, I guess. So I got in the kiddie pool and I put Henwolf in there with me for a minute. She didn't love the pool, but you know what she did love? Drinking from it. So now I have to keep an eye on her to make sure she doesn't drink too much chlorinated water because she's a beast and she finally has a dog dish big enough for her because it's 10 feet long. And thank you so much, Ray Cersei. She just contributed a very highly appreciated tip via Venmo. And she said, better late than never. See you ASAP. Thank you, sweetheart. I really do appreciate it. So let's see what else you guys are saying. But yeah, so Wolfie is doing very well. Oh, and there's Ray right there. I'm here. Sorry I'm late. Hey, man, we all are, late sometimes. I wouldn't sweat it. We've got, though, Ray, you didn't miss the final story of Still More Scary Stories for Sleepovers. You still get to finish that. And I'll show you this again, Ray, because you weren't here for the reveal, although I did post it on Facebook, but Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 10, I've got it. And we'll wrap up the series with this book, which is a few weeks away. So, all right, my friends. Well, let's see if we can't get into the final scary story of Still More Scary Stories for Sleepovers, and then we can move on to even more scary stories for sleepovers. So let's see what this next one's about. I will say, by the way, that story had me at snow. I don't know if I've talked about this much, but anything with snow pretty much captures my imagination right away. I've always been that way. If there's snow, there's something about the fact that it's so beautiful. The snow falling and the snow sitting is so beautiful, but then at the same time, it's also like, well, we got 10 inches of snow, so we might all die. It's like, oh, right. So, I love snow. Ray Cersei said, yes, that's so awesome. And then Heather Fairchild, I am here just listening and starting my own campfire tonight. Very nice. Enjoy it. Don't let it get too hot. It's warm out there, folks. At least in Ohio it is. All right, my friends, the final story of this one book before we move to the next. This story is called The Fabulous Flyers. And why can't I have them? Kevin crossed his arms and scowled at his mother. We can't afford them, she answered warily. You know I get you what I can. Besides, you already have sneakers. But I don't have fabulous flyers, Kevin whined. All the coolest kids have them. You could save up for them, his mom suggested. It would take me forever, Kevin pouted. You got Ellen a new doll. It was your sister's birthday, Kevin. His mom was starting to get angry. Your own birthday is coming up. We'll see about it then. Now, the subject is closed. My birthday isn't for 3 months, Kevin said, stamping his foot like a 3-year-old. His mother glared at him. The subject is closed. In a huff, Kevin picked up his books and stormed out of the kitchen. His mother just didn't understand. Some things How you walked and talked and what clothes you wore were really important. Those were the things that made you cool and popular, and being popular was more important to Kevin than anything. As he started to push open the front door, Kevin noticed his sister's new doll on the couch. Stupid thing, he muttered to himself. He picked up the doll and twisted its head until he heard a snapping sound and the head hung loosely from the doll's neck. Kevin smiled and threw the ruined toy on the floor. Breaking it made him feel a little better. At school, Kevin saw that even the school nerd, Franco Roberts, was wearing a new pair of fabulous flyers. Now Kevin was really the only sixth grader without them. By the time his best friend Walter flopped down in the seat next to him at lunch, Kevin was in a very bad mood. "Hey, Kev," Walter said brightly. "What's going on?" "What do you care?" Kevin snapped. Walter cringed. "Excuse me. What's bothering you?" "My mom," Kevin muttered. "She won't get me the sneakers I want. I'll never have enough money to buy them." "I saw a notice on the billboard at the market that old man McKenna is looking for someone to do yard work," Walter suggested. Kevin shuddered. "No way! Brandon lives just a couple of houses down from the McKenna place, and he says that old guy's a warlock. He heard spooky stuff like chanting coming from that place, and one time Brandon saw the old man burying something in his backyard." Walter laughed. "Maybe his cat died, and the chanting was probably coming from his TV. Sometimes old people turn up the volume really loud because they can't hear." Kevin frowned as he watched Franco Roberts saunter by. "Maybe you're right," he said. "I do need the money." On his way home, Kevin passed Thompson's shoe store. In the window was an orange sign that screamed, "Sale! Half off!" Arranged around the sign were several pairs of shoes, including a pair of fabulous flyers. Another small sign urged, "Try our layaway plan." Moments later, Kevin was turning down Raven Avenue, where old man McKenna lived. The house at the end of the block was shadowed by large leafy trees, and the window shades were all pulled down. The place looked so empty that anyone would have thought it was deserted. Hesitantly, Kevin stepped onto the porch. He reached up to ring the bell, then pulled back his hand. A plump brown spider had anchored one corner of its web on the button. "Gross!" Kevin yelped. Then suddenly, the door creaked open, just a crack. "What do you want?" asked a raspy voice. I'm Kevin Pope," Kevin stuttered, straining to see inside. "I'm here about your ad for someone to do yard work." The door opened wider and Kevin jumped back. There stood old man McKenna, with his wrinkled bald head and beady black eyes. "The sneakers," Kevin reminded himself, "have to do this. I have to do this for the fabulous flyers." "Rake the leaves," the grizzled old man said. "I beg your pardon?" "Leaves!" he barked. "I want you to rake the leaves in the front yard." He pointed a bony finger to a corner of the porch, where a worn rake leaned against the wall. "I'll give you $10 to do it right now. Take it or leave it." Within an hour, Kevin had finished the job. "I'm all done," he announced to Mr. McKinnon. "Can I get my money now?" The old man simply turned and walked down the hallway, motioning for Kevin to follow. Gathering up his courage, Kevin stepped inside the dark, dingy house. Mr. McKenna led him to a room where there were stacks of dusty old books. Bottles of strange-colored fluids and powders lined every shelf. "Wait here, and don't touch anything," Mr. McKinnon ordered, then shuffled into the next room. Kevin glanced around uneasily. He had a creepy feeling that he wasn't alone. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something move behind a pile of books, but when he looked, there was nothing there. He peered into the shadows. That was when an elaborately carved box caught his eye. It was on a low shelf, nearly hidden behind a thick book. Unlike everything else in the room, it was shiny and free of dust. Although old man McKenna had warned him not to touch anything, Kevin was drawn to that box. "How's he going to know?" he mumbled, opening the lid. Much to his surprise, neatly folded in the red velvet lining, was a crisp $100 bill. Kevin gaped at the money. Then the sound of the old man's footsteps caused him to make a decision. He plucked the bill from the box and slipped the money into his pocket. Seconds later, Old Man McKenna entered. He stood right in front of Kevin and stared into his eyes as if he were probing the boy's thoughts. Kevin felt queasy as the man's dark eyes flashed angrily. "Here," he grunted, holding out his hand. "One must always pay one's debts." Kevin started to tremble. He looked down and saw the wrinkled $10 bill in the equally wrinkled hand. "Thanks," said Kevin, snatching the money as quickly as he could, while trying not to touch the creepy hand. Then he backed down the hall. I'll stop by again to see if you need anything else done." "Oh, I'm quite sure I'll be seeing you," the old man said, without a smile. Kevin charged through the door and ran down the street. Even without looking, he was aware that Mr. McKenna was watching him from the upstairs window. Heading straight for the shoe store, Kevin asked himself out loud, "What does an old man like that need with all this money?" But the question, it didn't linger long. Soon he was walking out of the store wearing a brand new pair of fabulous flyers, almost proud of his theft. When he got home, Kevin was glad that his mother wasn't there. He wouldn't be able to wear the shoes openly, at least not for a while. He wrapped the sneakers up in a plastic bag and stashed them in a little-used cupboard in the garage. It would be easy to retrieve them in the morning, and he could change on his way to school. The following day, Kevin couldn't wait to show off his prize. "How'd you do it?" Walter asked. "You couldn't have done that much yard work." "There are ways," Kevin hedged. "Besides, what does it matter as long as I got what I wanted?" "Well, look who's got some flyers," someone said. Kevin looked up to see Nick Maston. He was the most popular kid in class. "We're getting together to shoot a few hoops after school," Nick grinned. "Want to play?" "Sounds good," Kevin replied happily. "I'll be there." By the time the game was over, Kevin was feeling great. In his new fabulous flyers, he'd played like a champ. He'd never jumped so high or turned so quickly. It almost felt as if the shoes had a life of their own. He replayed the game over and over in his mind, shot by shot on the way home. Then, all at once, he stopped. He was not headed home. He was standing under a sign that read, Raven Avenue. "What am I doing here?" he said in surprise. He started to walk away, but his feet seemed to turn against his will. Unable to control his own movement, he stepped into the street just as a car was speeding by. Kevin screamed and the tires squealed as the driver slammed on the brakes and swerved. "Idiot!" the driver yelled as he drove off. But Kevin couldn't stop. Step by step, he moved closer to the eerie house at the end of the block. He tried to turn back, but it was no use. Something else was directing his footsteps. As if trapped in a nightmare and powerless to end it, he was forced toward Old Man McKenna's. As Kevin reached the path leading to the house, the front door began to open. Kevin tried to scream, but no sound came out. Somehow he had become a prisoner in his own body. He stepped onto the sagging porch, and the door yawned wider like a gaping mouth waiting to swallow him. The entryway was hot and stuffy. As Kevin's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw that someone was waiting for him. At the end of the hallway, Old Man McKenna stood, glaring at him. He looked different now. Thick ringlets of white hair writhed around his shoulders like serpents. He raised his arms and held them open toward Kevin. His long, bony fingers were tipped with sharp, curved nails. Small, shadowy creatures raced back and forth at the old man's feet, chattering in high-pitched squeals. Breathless with fear, Kevin continued to move forward against his will, step by step. He felt the shoes tighten painfully on his feet. One of the shadowy beasts raced toward him. It stopped and started in a series of jerky moments until finally it was crouched at his feet, hissing up at him. Then it bared a row of tiny, needle-like teeth and lunged forward, sinking its fangs into Kevin's ankle. "Be patient, my little ones," the old man commanded. "I know you're hungry. It won't be much longer, and we will feed. He smiled at Kevin, showing his own sharp teeth. I hope you've enjoyed your new shoes. They have a special feature, courtesy of your own greed. You see, you acquired them with what you stole from me. So, they're actually mine. And so is anything that's in them. With every ounce of strength he had left, Kevin willed himself to scream, No! He crumpled to the ground and tore at the laces of the sneakers, but they kept retying themselves. Hysterically, Kevin twisted his body and ripped the laces with his teeth. Scraping bits of skin from his ankles, he ripped the evil shoes from his feet. Barefoot and bleeding, Kevin fled down the hallway as the door began to creak closed. He managed to leap forward and through the gap just before it slammed shut, hot tears streaming down his face and his ankles throbbing as he ran through the empty streets. By the time his mom arrived home, Kevin had scrubbed his battered feet and was already in bed. Are you okay, sweetie? She said, sitting on the edge of the bed and feeling his forehead. Yeah, I'm okay, he lied. I'm just tired. He couldn't tell her. He couldn't tell anyone. Ever. After his mother had left the room, Kevin lay awake for a long time, shivering. All he could think about were Old Man McKenna's horrid monsters and the sound of their sharp teeth, gnashingly hungry. But he had escaped. He was safe, and he would never go near that house again. Finally, he fell into a light sleep. Then, something jerked him back. He sat up, wide awake. His darkened room was completely empty and silent, but he felt a terrible sense of dread. Then he noticed that his feet still hurt, as though something were squeezing them. He reached down to rub his sore ankles and felt something warm and smooth. What the? He gasped, yanking back his hand. Even in the darkness, he could see the blanket move slightly. Slowly, barely breathing, he stretched out his trembling hand and clutched at the corner of the covers. Then, in one move, he tore them away. His heart leaped to his throat. The fabulous flyers! They were on his feet! He watched with mounting terror as the laces twined around each other, tying themselves firmly, one after another, into horrible, inescapable knots. Ha ha ha! Don't steal shoes, kids. That's the moral of that story. Oh! That one, don't steal, everybody. That's very important. So let's see what you guys are saying. First of all, Morgan Moore, thank you so much for your tip. I very, very much appreciate it. And his note was always happy to help in any way possible. I appreciate it. I also hope, Morgan, you get a chance to submit another short story for my podcast, Weekly Spooky, which, by the way, many of you listening to this are probably aware, but I have a weekly podcast where I read original fiction. It's not family-friendly like this show, but it is called Weekly Spooky. You can find it at weeklyspooky.com, and we have a brand new story up for the 4th of July, which is about a dog getting bloody revenge against those darn fireworks. Very, very fun story. But thank you so much, Morgan. Let's see what all you guys are saying. Let's see. All right, here we go. Morgan Moore said Heelys greater than fabulous flyers. Tony Marr, all the cool kids have them. Guess that's why you don't, Kevin. Ray Cersei, uh-oh, the doll is going to kill him. That would have been an interesting direction to go. In fact, he never got punished for destroying... Well, I mean, he got punished for everything, but he never got punished for destroying his poor sister's doll. Harsh. Diane Korn Adler, Kevin, break your sister's doll? Now you have to die. Spoken like a true mother. Tony Marr, speaking from personal experience, never follow an old man into his house. I'm not going to ask any follow-up questions on that. And then Shane Migliavacca said, what's in the box? Morgan Moore said, this kid is definitely going to get it. Yeah, he had Brat who's going to get his comeuppance written all over him from the moment he said, I want it now. And then, let's see, Ray Cersei said, ouch. Yeah, Tony Marr, whatever happened to British Knights? Oh, yeah, BKs. I don't know whatever happened to those. Ray Cersei said, shoes. Oh, my God. And then freaky. And then Shane Migliavacca said, shoe horror. It's like shoegaze, but not. Well, he didn't say that part. That was my own addition to it. Morgan Moore said, that was a good one. My favorite so far tonight. These last two have been absolutely great. I agree. And we're about to start a new book, so I'm very curious because it's the same author. I'll talk about that in just a second. Ray Cersei, I'm disappointed the doll had nothing to do with this. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime. No, but anyway. So here's the dealio. We just finished still more scary stories for sleepovers. So out of the 10 scary stories for sleepovers, the first book, I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but the first book was written by one author. And then books 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 were written by Q.L. Pierce. That's who wrote this book right here. And most of the books you guys have heard me read from this series were written by Q.L. Pierce. So this, I believe, is one of the last of the books written by Q.L. Pierce. I believe, because I'm saving number 10 for last, which I'm very curious. This one's written by Mark Keel. I have no idea what it's going to be like. Ray Cersei said, okay, well, I'll take the song. So, if you are ready, we will begin even more scary stories for sleepovers. Published by Price Stern, apparently. Okay. Whew, I got a little warm. This first story is called The Tune of Terror. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Juan tapped heavily on the small drum. Hey, mister, he asked the man who was obviously in charge of the booth at the flea market. How much for the drum? $20, the man said without hesitation. For an old used drum? Juan questioned, but the man refused to bargain. Moments later, the boy caught up with his mother and twin baby brother and sister. Did you find anything you like? His mom asked, smiling. No, he fibbed. I haven't seen anything at all. Juan had a natural talent for music. He seemed to be able to pick up almost any instrument and play at least a simple tune. For his birthday, his mother had promised to buy him anything he wanted at the local market. Still, Juan knew that they couldn't afford much. He passed by booths offering guitars, drums, and a variety of unusual instruments. Then he noticed a slender, ivory-white flute that appeared to have been carved from a single piece of... What? The man at the booth was cleaning the instrument with a scrap of dark blue velvet that drew attention to its fine finish. When he saw Juan looking at the flute, he offered it to the boy. At first, Juan ran his fingers over the fine, thin instrument. It was as smooth and cold as polished marble. Gently, he picked it up and held it in his hands. It felt as light as air. He lifted it to his lips. Hey, kid, the vendor said, grabbing Juan's wrist in a beefy hand. No freebies. You want to try it out? You buy it. How much? Juan responded just as rudely. The gruff man rubbed his unshaven chin. Well, he said slyly, it has been in my family for many generations, an inheritance from my late uncle. It would be impossible for me to part with it for less than... He leaned over and whispered a price. Oh, right, Juan laughed, putting the flute back in its resting place. In your next life. He started to walk away when the man called him back. Wait! He eyed Juan nervously. Look, I was never too fond of my late uncle, and to be honest, I would like to be rid of the flute. What do you think is a fair price? Juan made an offer of $3, which he fully expected the man to laugh at. Instead, the seller accepted the offer eagerly. He even threw in a soft leather pouch to hold the instrument. Once at home, Juan couldn't wait to play his new flute. He had tried only a few notes when his mother appeared at his bedroom door. "Sweetheart, you'll wake the twins," she said gently. "They've just now fallen asleep for their nap. Would you mind trying out your birthday flute another time?" Reluctantly, Juan slid the ghostly pale instrument into its pouch. It was raining, so he couldn't play outside. Then he had an idea. "I'll be back later," he called out to his mom and dad. Pulling on his heavy jacket, he headed for the community center. It was a large complex complete with enclosed booths for people who wanted to read or talk. He could play his flute there. Once settled, Juan pulled out the flute and touched it to his lips. It was strangely warm. He tried a note, and then another. It was so simple to play. The tone was fragile and haunting. "It was a very old, very lonely place, a place of the dead. No one had been buried in this ancient cemetery for over a century, perhaps two. But in a desolate corner, under an unmarked crumbling stone, deep in the cold clay soil, something stirred. It was listening. Ponderously, it raised its feeble, fleshless hand and scraped at the rotted shreds of its coffin. Bit by bit, minute by minute, it scratched an opening toward the land of the living." Like a dreamer waking from a restless sleep, Juan felt suddenly uneasy. Noting that it was already dark out, he slid the mysterious flute into its plush sheath, turned up his collar against the gentle rain, and made his way home. "Good morning, hun. Did you sleep well?" Juan's mom asked when he came into the kitchen the following morning. She stirred a fluffy pile of scrambled eggs in a large iron skillet while his dad buttered a small stack of toast. It was Juan's job to fill the juice glasses. While they each helped to prepare breakfast and take care of the twins, they listened to the local news on the radio. Something the announcer said caught Juan's attention, and he listened more closely. "Authorities were shocked to discover that Ridgewood Community Center was vandalized during the night. The body of the security guard was found this morning by the center director. According to early reports from the scene, every round in the guard's guns had been fired, and there is no sign of the person or persons who committed the crime. The cause of the security guard's death appears to have been a broken neck." "How terrible," Juan's dad said, shaking his head. "Who could be responsible for such a thing?" "Juan, I want you to come straight home after school today," his mom declared, obviously worried. The boy grimaced. "But Mom, I was going to go over to Roger's house after school. You already said it was okay. He doesn't live anywhere near the community center." She glanced at his dad, who nodded. "All right, but be home before dark." Roger and Juan were best buddies. They often got together after school to play computer games, watch TV, or listen to music. Juan was eager to show his friend his birthday present. "Wait till you see it," Juan said as he pulled the pouch from his backpack. "I think it's really old. All I know is that I've never seen another one like it." He slipped the flute out and held it up proudly for Roger to view. "That's it?" Roger questioned. "That's what you're so excited about?" "It's gross." "Gross? What do you mean?" Roger screwed up his nose. "It looks like it's made out of an old bone." The boy's expression changed suddenly to one of enthusiasm. "Hey, maybe it's a human bone. That would be really cool. Can you play it?" Juan answered with a short, cheerful tune, but as he ran his fingers along the instrument, his mood began to change. The music became more somber, almost mournful. It was a dull, gray afternoon, and once again a light drizzle began to fall. But the hideous corpse shuffling slowly, painstakingly over the sodden ground of the nearby woods paid no attention to the rain. It turned its eyeless skull this way and that, as if to listen. A few rotting rags hung from its ancient bones, which were caked with the thick, black mud of the grave. It had been a very long time since it had felt the open air. Nearly 200 years had passed since it had been living, breathing being. It couldn't remember what it felt like to have a heart beating in its chest, to feel air sucked in through its nostrils, to feel the warmth of human skin. But it could remember the feeling of intense rage. Rage that fueled its ever-increasing strength. Rage that lasts beyond a lifetime. It remembered, too, the foolish moment when, as a human, it had stolen the horse of a rich man. It could almost see the mob that had dragged it to face its accuser. It could almost taste the incredible fear that had made it beg as two men had held its arms out over a chopping block. The pitiless executioner had carried out the sentence that was given to horse thieves, then left it there alone as the life drained out of it. Now it remembered its dying vow, to never rest until it was whole once more. It turned deeper into the woods and plodded in the direction of the eerie music, too distant for the human ear to hear. If there had been any living creature to see the horrible thing in the failing light, it would have noticed that the corpse's left arm was indeed missing. Roger shivered. That music is giving me the creeps. Can't you play something more... No, one said, almost as if he were in a trance. It seemed to him that no one wanted to listen. Annoyed, he shoved the flute into his backpack and stood up. I gotta go anyway. I promised my mom I'd be home before dark. Roger looked out the window. It's almost dark now, he commented. Yeah, I guess I better cut through the woods, Juan said. The boys said goodbye and Juan set out on the familiar shortcut home. The dismal afternoon was rapidly turning to evening. The shadows under the trees deepened to gloomy pools of black. At least the rain had stopped. The ground was spongy under Juan's feet and the soggy leaves deadened the sound of his footsteps. He became lost in thought as he trudged along. All at once, he became acutely aware of his surroundings. Something was different, somehow wrong. The air seemed heavier and harder to breathe. He sensed that he was not alone. His ears strained to hear a sound. Any sound, but there was nothing. No, there was someone, or something, coming closer. He squinted into the darkness, and his heart began to pound. He didn't know if he should run or try to hide. In the next instant, it no longer mattered. A form stepped out of the shadows. Juan? He heard his dad's familiar voice let out a long sigh. Dad, what are you doing here? He asked with great relief. His father put his arm around the boy's shoulder. Roger called to say you were taking the shortcut home. I thought I'd come out and meet you. After what happened last night, I don't want you roaming around by yourself. Besides, dinner's ready and I'm starving. The two quickened their pace toward home. They were unaware of the gruesome thing nearby. The thing that was working its way toward Roger's house. The last place where the flute had been played. The sound of sirens woke Juan from a sound sleep. Still groggy, he heard another sound, much closer. It was the ringing of a telephone. He glanced at the glowing numbers on the clock radio on his nightstand. 3 o'clock, he moaned and rolled out of bed to see what was going on. His mother and father were in the kitchen when he got there, and he heard his father's worried voice. Arthur? What on earth? Arthur Peyton lived next door to Roger. Juan watched as his dad's face paled. He seemed to be at a loss for words. He only nodded as the voice at the other end went on. Finally, his dad mumbled something, hung up the receiver, and looked at Juan. Something terrible has happened. Roger and his folks, He paused as if trying to find the words. He licked his lips and continued. The inside of the house was torn up and they're all dead. All at once it seemed to Juan that the sound of his father's voice was coming from very far away. He heard the words about how Arthur had heard screams and had called the police, but they didn't seem to make any sense. Crying, his mother put her arms around Juan and drew him close. He pulled away. I think I need to be alone for a while, he said. Sitting at the edge of his bed, Juan saw the flute half out of the pack as he tossed on the floor, as he had tossed on the floor when he came home. He picked it up and thought about how he'd been so annoyed when his friend hadn't liked his music. Softly, he began to play. The music soothed him. The flute felt so warm in his hands, almost alive. Outside, in the night, the blood-spattered corpse turned its steps in the direction of the music. It was so near, so very near. The thing's left shoulder ached. Soon, it would be whole. Soon, it could rest. Juan continued to play, heedless of the loathsome entity that scraped up the walkway to his home, the putrid thing that slowly reached its one arm toward the door. Ha ha ha! That was fun. I wasn't sure what to do with the, there's an entire element of, the parts where I, like, spoke really theatrically, they were, paragraphs that were just in italics. So I figured I would just try to differentiate them. I hope you guys like that one. Let's see what you guys are saying. Tony Marr, thank you so much for your tip. He said, for freaking awesome storytelling. I try my best, my friend. I really do try. I really enjoy reading out loud, and I really enjoy reading a scary story now and again. Definitely gets me revved up. So let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Okay, here we go. Ray Cersei said, is that the dude's uncle's bone? Not quite, although sort of. The pipe is alive? You're getting there. Morgan Moore, I'm guessing this is the memories of the flute? Almost, but no. Ray Cersei, yikes. That is correct. Tony Marr, crap, it's a haunted arm flute. Only thing worse is a cursed footpan flute. I'm never going to do an impression of a pan flute again. Michelle Antisocial, people also want me to play happier songs. I get it. Michelle, how often when you're playing a show does everyone, or when you're playing your guitar at all, does everyone in that building die? That's a real question. You should probably answer it, because now I'm scared. You're making me scared. You're giving me scareds. Morgan Moore, these stories aren't messing around tonight. You're right. I mean, this one had some serious death, destruction, and terror, and I got to do my newscaster voice. Ray Cersei, choose nails. I'm regretting my snack. You did great. Thank you, Ray. I really do appreciate it. Why are you regretting your snack, Ray? Was the story grossing you out? It had some grossness to it. Keith Tomlin, putrid isn't used enough. Tony Marr, I'm hoping the zombie just wants to hear Flight of the Bumblebee. And then I think Michelle was responding to my question all the time. I'm so sorry to hear that so many people die at your performances, Michelle. That is hugely worrying. So I hope you guys it sounds like you guys are having a good time. I'm having a good time. I actually had a pretty stressful day. I mentioned a job got canceled for obvious reasons. A job in August I was kind of counting on to, everything is complex. The reason that I started doing these streams, almost 3 months ago, something like that, time is hard to grasp, was because I was stuck at home, and I'm still basically stuck at home, but I was stuck at home, and I needed something to do that was constructive and fun and let me interact and made me look forward to something. And doing this show, this live stream, every Wednesday at 8 o'clock has really helped me a lot. And I intend to do it for several more weeks to go, and then I'll probably take a short break and come back. Probably going to take a break after I finish all of the Scary Stories for Sleepovers books so that I can find some new books to read. But I just want you guys to know how much I appreciate you. I wanted you to know how many times I've had a great laugh with you guys, how many times you guys have kept me company, and to be completely frank, I know I mention it all the time, but it's because it meant so much to me, and how many times you guys have literally bought my groceries for me through your generous tips, and I really do appreciate it. And that's not me saying give me more tips, although, I mean, of course, give me more tips, but also just hit share and know that I really mean it. If some weeks you can't afford to tip, I'm never going to be mad. If some weeks you only have $1, I'm never going to be mad. If you never tip ever, I'm never going to be mad. I just want to say thank you guys so much for hanging out with me so many weeks in a row. We've had so many people come again and again and again, and I just really appreciate it. So, with that said, I think it's time for at least a few more spoopy stories. It's about 9 o'clock. We can at least get 2 more and maybe a few more than that. The throat is holding up well tonight. Ray Cersei said, just a wee bit gross. And then she said, it's helped me a lot too. And and I'm glad, Ray, because that's something else I want to mention. You guys, when you comment on Facebook or when you send me a Facebook message or when you send, whatever correspondence you want, and you tell me that you look forward to this all week or that it's really made you very happy, it's entertained you, it's entertained your kids, stuff like that, it means the world to me. It really does. It really, really does. Because I'm just sitting in, it's my photo studio, but it's the spare bedroom of my house. I'm just sitting in the spare bedroom of my house with some fancy lights I already own for making movies, talking to a lens and looking at a laptop, and I look forward to it all week. Some weeks I'm so tired. There have been several Wednesdays I have been so tired as work kind of ebbs and flows and I started to work again. I've been so tired and I drag my butt in here and I get the lights set up and I get the sound set up. And then by 8 o'clock, I am just laughing and smiling. And I just appreciate you guys. I'm going to shut up about it now. Because I want to read a scary story. Tony Marr said, thank you, Henrik. You are welcome. You are beyond welcome. Oh, and also, Keith Tomlin, thank you so much for your tip. His note says, let me see if it'll load. His note says, smoke 'em if you got 'em. Fair enough. So let's go to another scary story. And then we'll go for it. Oh, Keith just commented. Oh, Michelle just commented. No, you broke the illusion. It wasn't enough, Michelle, that it's still daylight outside. I actually had to, when we started doing this this live stream, I actually it used to be dark at around 8 o'clock. Now it's light till almost 10, and I actually had to block out the window in the room. So I'm sorry if I'm killing the immersion. I didn't mean it. I'm really in the woods sitting in front of a campfire. But I am really reading these stories for the first time. So Keith Thomas said, your campfire stories almost make me want to put on pants. Almost. Ray Cersei said, read a story, all caps. Yes, ma'am. And Tony Marr said, yeah, wait, you aren't in the woods? This is a sham. Oh, no. It's becoming that Family Guy thing. Hey, you're a phony. A big fat phony. All right. Story time. Sorry, I got a little carried away with the waxing. Okay. This story, my friends, is called The Shape of Fear. Barbara stood confidently in front of the class as she gave her report. The town of Lansford looked as if it had been lifted up from somewhere in Central Europe and plopped right down in the middle of New England. The people of Lansford were very proud of their old world customs and beliefs. Most of their traditions were harmless. But there was one in particular that was quite bizarre. Some folks believed in the existence of vile creatures known as were-people, evil beings who looked like humans but could change their shape at will. Barbara wasn't at all nervous as she talked. Her family had lived in Lansford since the town was first established nearly 2 centuries ago, and she knew more than most kids her age about its history. Were-people who could take on animal forms and characteristics were known as shapeshifters. They would use this ability to harm others, she read from her paper. In the guise of a raven, a were-person could spy on its neighbors and learn their secrets. As a fox or wolf, it could dig up and destroy crops or kill livestock. As a deadly spider or rattlesnake, it could even creep into a home and commit murder without leaving behind a single clue to its human identity. Barbara paused and looked around. Everyone was caught up in every word she said. Mrs. Kaminsky, her teacher, was nodding approvingly. This is an A for sure, Barbara thought, glad that she'd worked so hard on her report. She continued aloud. While a shapeshifter was in its beastly form, it would not age a single minute, and it could not be killed. Only when it was in human form would it grow older and finally die. Most people thought that the wicked life of a were-being was a horrible curse, Barbara explained. They believed that to become one, you had to be bitten by a were-person. The bite had to be deep and draw blood. She lowered her voice dramatically. But at one time in the history of Lansford, the countryside was plagued by 3 terrible monsters who'd been willing prey of a very powerful were-being. They terrorized their neighbors and were finally hunted down and killed. Barbara was very proud that her own ancestor, Jonathan Rourke, had presided over the trials when the trio was finally captured and brought to justice, and the justice of some 200 years before had been swift. In a field near the edge of town stood a huge tree, a hanging tree that had supported 3 sturdy ropes for the accused shapeshifters. The doomed villains had died without confessing the name of their leader, the one who had corrupted them all. But because the vandalism, thefts, and murders had stopped, the search soon ended. Many modern residents were afraid of the hanging tree, but Barbara was fascinated by it. She could easily see it from her bedroom. In fact, it was so close that sometimes, when the moon was just right, she could see its shadow on the thin white curtains drawn across her window. Nothing else grew in the field where it stood. Her dad said that there was probably something in the roots that had ruined the soil. Some superstitious townfolk claimed that the were-people had been buried there, but no one knew for certain. In fact, Barbara said, lowering her papers and whispering in her to her wide-eyed classmates, no one knows what happened to the bodies at all. Thank you, Barbara, Mrs. Kaminsky said. That was an excellent report. You may take your seat. After class, Barbara and several of her friends stopped at the local bookstore to buy the newest issue of their favorite scary magazine, Tales from Beyond the Grave. It was displayed on a tall wire rack right beside the front entrance. Look at this stupid cave monster, Angela complained. It couldn't frighten my baby brother. I think the were-people of Lansford are a lot scarier, and they really existed. Barbara laughed and shook her head. No, they didn't. It's just a stupid old story that grandparents use to frighten their grandkids. But, Dolores began, what about your report in class? You said that your own ancestor helped catch them. I said he helped catch the 3 people who were accused of being were-people and committing crimes, Barbara corrected. I never said I actually believed they were really shapeshifters. I'll bet old Jonathan didn't believe it either. That's why he wasn't afraid of them. Angela tilted her head to one side and asked, what do you mean? When the bad guys had been caught, Jonathan was the only one brave enough to actually do the hanging and pronounce them dead, Barbara answered with pride. All the other people were too afraid to get close. They were probably scared of getting bitten. She lunged at Dolores, pretending to bite at her neck. Dolores squealed and the other girls laughed. All at once, Barbara became aware of someone standing near the group. She looked up slowly. A small, thin-faced woman with mournful eyes was glaring at her. It's very foolish to make jest of things that you don't understand, the woman warned. Jest? Grinning, Barbara wrinkled her nose and made a funny face at her friends. Quite so, Mistress Barbara, the stranger continued scornfully. The grin faded from Barbara's lips. How do you know my name? A dark smile barely flickered across the woman's grim face. Think of me, she paused, and the smile became almost threatening, as a friend of the family. She turned and walked quickly out of the store. Who was that weird woman, Mistress Barbara? Dolores murmured. Barbara leaned against the large storefront window and gazed in the direction the woman had taken. Except for a couple of young boys wheeling their bikes along. The sidewalk was deserted. I don't know, she answered nervously. She had an uncomfortable feeling that she had not seen the last. of the odd woman. "It's such a lovely night," Barbara's mom said as she leaned in the doorway of her daughter's room that evening. "Dad and I are going to take a walk. Would you like to come along?" Barbara glanced up. "No thanks. I have reading to finish." Her mom crossed to the bedroom window, pulled back the curtains and opened it. "At least you can get some fresh air," she said, stroking Barbara's long brown hair. "We'll be back in a while." As soon as she was alone, Barbara tossed the book to the floor and got up to reclose the window. She had had her hand on the sill when she noticed something that made her stop. Someone was hunched over beneath the hanging tree. Leaning out slightly, Barbara could just make out the sound of a shovel biting into the barren earth. "What in the world?" Barbara muttered under her breath. As she spoke, a silver-rimmed cloud slipped away from across the face of the full moon. Barbara gasped. "It's her!" In the bright moonlight, she could clearly see the woman who had spoken to her in the bookstore. At first, it appeared that she might be digging something up, but after a moment, it was plain that the stranger was actually burying a small, dark object. Barbara watched with growing curiosity. Finally, the woman completed her task and set off hurriedly along the dirt road that led to town. Barbara pulled the eyelet drapes closed and stood at the window for only a moment before she made up her mind to see for herself what was hidden away beneath the tree. If she acted quickly, she knew she could slip out and be back before her parents returned from their walk. Throwing on a sweater, she raced to the garden shed and grabbed a small hand trowel. Within moments, she was standing under the twisted limbs of the tree. She had stood in the same place many times before, but never alone at night. The branches cast peculiar shadows on the ground all around her, and when the breeze rustled the dry leaves, the ground almost seemed to be moving, as if Barbara shuddered to think about it. "I'd better get out of here before I start spooking myself," she said aloud. She easily found the place where the woman had been digging and started to work in the soft earth. It wasn't long before the trowel hit something hard. Working rapidly, Barbara unearthed a small carved wooden box with a plain metal pin and clasp. Hesitantly, she slipped out the pin, then stopped. She had the eerie feeling that she was being watched. Glancing from side to side, she reassured herself she was alone. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, Barbara heard a soft rustling noise. Probably just a possum, she convinced herself. But she could barely control the trembling of her fingers as she cautiously lifted the lid of the box. Moonlight illuminated a small shiny object. A tooth. Some sort of animal tooth on a thin leather strap. It rested on a fragile scrap of paper that appeared to have been torn from a book. As she stared inside, a shadow moved across the contents of the box. Barbara turned her gaze upward, and her eyes locked with a pair of glowing yellow eyes. A scream caught in her throat. Crouching on the limb above was a large creature, part wolf, part ferret, part rat. Slowly it edged toward her, clinging to the ancient branch with its long, curved claws. Clutching the box, Barbara spun around and ran. Reaching for the safety of her home, she slammed the door behind her and locked it, then raced to her room. She fell across her bed and tried to catch her breath, then chuckled to herself. "This is ridiculous," she declared, smiling to the smiling teddy bear on her dresser. "It was only a dumb animal." She opened the box to examine the contents more closely. Holding the sharp-pointed tooth in the palm of her hand, she took out the folded page and spread it open on her bed. The words were handwritten in a strange language. "What is this? It looks like Latin or something," she whispered to herself. Slowly, she pronounced each word. Then, something, a feeling, forced her to look up at the drapes drawn across the open window. The light from the full moon had painted a shadowy image of the hanging tree. It danced back and forth as the delicate white fabric moved in the soft breeze. While she watched, 3 of the horrible creatures like the one she saw in the tree before stole along the lowest branch and dropped to the ground. As if she were in a trance, Barbara's eyes returned to the page. She felt compelled to continue. She had barely spoken the last word when the first creature crept soundlessly over the sill of the open window. With growing terror, Barbara curled against her pillows as a furred paw gripped the edge of her bed with razor-like claws. The beast drew itself up, and once again, Barbara stared into its glowing yellow eyes. "It is time," the thing hissed, "to fulfill your part of the bargain, Mistress Barbara. It was most cooperative of you to voluntarily retrieve the box and read the agreement. But then we counted on your being too curious, for your own good." Barbara had heard the voice before, that very day, in fact, at the bookstore. "This isn't happening," she stammered. "I must be dreaming. I didn't make any bargain." "Oh, but you did. You've just agreed to it by reading the very words that set us free." Two more of the hideous creatures slipped into the room. "It was promised by your own ancestor, Jonathan Rourke, the were-being who made us what we are." "You're lying!" Barbara screamed. "He wasn't a were-person! He killed you!" "No," the beast showed its fangs with a nasty snarl. "He made it appear so. We did indeed give up our human forms and vow to live as animals to soothe the townspeople's need for vengeance. Afterward, your ancestor lived out his life free of suspicion. In return, he arranged for us to have our freedom in a new time, a time when the old beliefs would be considered no more than tales told to frighten children." Barbara shook her head in disbelief. "You see," the creature continued, "Jonathan Rourke pledged that in 10 generations, his own descendant would take our place. As the time drew near, I was able to appear briefly as a human to carry out the plan." "No!" Barbara gasped. "I don't want any part of this!" As she watched, the three creatures began to change. Their limbs stretched outward and their faces began to take on human features. "It's too late," the woman snarled. "The curse has already been passed to you by the bite of your own ancestor. See for yourself." She gestured toward Barbara's clenched fist. Opening her hand, the girl saw that the tooth she had clutched in fear, the tooth of Jonathan Rourke, had deeply pierced her palm. Dark red blood trickled down her wrist. Before her own eyes, Barbara watched her trembling hands shrink into dark, fur-covered paws, and her nails lengthen into powerful claws. She opened her mouth to scream, but the sound was no longer human. Not far away on the path leading to their home, Barbara's mother gripped her father's arm. "What was that?" she cried. He patted her hand and said soothingly, "It was nothing, dear. Just some kind of animal." That's a good ending. That is an ending I enjoyed quite a bit. "It's nothing, dear. Just some animal." That's the stuff I live for right there. Let's see what you kids are saying. And get a little bit of water. All right. So, oh goodness. Okay, Shin Migliavacca said, "Thanks for bringing us together." My pleasure, my friend, my pleasure. Keith Tomlin said, "Attica, Attica." Ray Cersei said, "Here, here." Tony Marr said, "Man, my report back in the day was just about Montana. Chief export? Wheat." "Quick fact about my hometown, only city in America without a cemetery. Take that, Barbara." That's really weird, Tony, that your hometown is the only city in America without a cemetery. That is strange. Ray Cersei, "Oopsie, this is definitely spooky city." And then, "Oh, Barbara, why?" Shane Migliavacca, "Another lesson. Never open a mystery box." Keith Tomlin, "Part ferret. Rachel would have adopted it." Yeah, if Rachel's listening, it was part wolf, part rat, part ferret. That's pretty much her ideal pet. Ray Cersei, are you coming to the tree?" "Barbara, you dumbo." And then Ray said, okay, this is my favorite tonight so far. Craig Cohen said, they got you, Barbara. Craig Cohen said, my ex was named Barb and born on Halloween, too. Ooh, now things are getting spoopy. This is getting close to maximum spoops. Wow. Tony Marr said it was all farmland. They buried their dead on the land. Ugh. I mean, it's pragmatic, but a little creepy. So, wow. I'm glad you guys enjoyed that one. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'd say I got one more in me. One more story I can read. And then I need to take off because my throat is starting to get a little hoarse. So I don't want to rough it up too bad. So, friends, one more story for the night, and then I'll see you all next Wednesday for even more. Ooh, this one's got a banger title. I mean, it won't beat the Slime Monsters one from last week, but this one's a pretty banger of a title. This story, my friends, is called Feast of the Hungry Ghosts. Lubo helped his mother hang the last of the tiny white paper lanterns on the porch. There, she said, and smiled at her son. They look beautiful. Our ancestors would be pleased. The boy groaned. Mom, our ancestors couldn't care less about whether or not we decorate our back porch. Do not be disrespectful, she scolded him gently. I know you do not see the value in our traditions, but the Feast of the Hungry Ghosts means a great deal to your grandparents. They will only be here for 3 days. Please, try not to spoil it for them. But it's stupid to make a meal for dead people and leave it in the cemetery, Lubo whined. Especially since our relatives aren't even in the cemetery. They're in China. Lubo shook his head. His mother gave him a warning look. That is enough. Just then a girl with long dark hair peeked around the side of the house. Hi, Lubo. Hi, Mrs. Chang, she said, smiling and looking at the lanterns. Oh, what pretty decorations. Good morning, Zulai, Lubo's mom responded. Lubo grabbed his catcher's mitt and headed for the gate. Gotta go, Mom. Zulai and I will be late for softball practice. Come straight home afterwards, she called out to her son. Your grandparents will be arriving this afternoon. Lubo's family had come to the United States from China, but he had been born here. He was embarrassed by some of the customs they still followed. In particular, he disliked the Feast of the Hungry Ghosts. It is celebrated to honor family ancestors by preparing a special meal and offering gifts to the dead. He and his family would set up the meal at the cemetery and eat right there. When they finished, they would leave food and gifts for the departed. Lubo was silent as Zulai walked along pushing their bikes. Your grandparents are coming too, huh? Zulai sighed. Mine arrived last night. Are your folks going to make you go to the cemetery? Yeah, Lubo said with obvious irritation. I guess it would be different if the graves of our ancestors were here, Zulai reasoned. It's kind of creepy, though, going out to the old cemetery on Gilardi Road. I'm glad we only have to go in the morning. Lubo nodded. My dad told me it's the only place that will allow the ceremonies to be held. There are a lot of families here that still want to do it like they did in the old country, but they don't have grave sites to go to. Some Chinese families actually have relatives buried here, and they have agreed to share a common area on the grounds with the others. It isn't exactly the same as visiting your relatives, but my mom said that it is the spirit of the celebration that counts. Zulai kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk and watched it skitter into the gutter. I suppose when our grandparents die, the tradition will die too. Lubo laughed. Well, I'm certainly not going to do it if I don't have to. When Lubo returned home, his grandparents had arrived. His grandmother was in the kitchen with his mom preparing special dishes, including savory dumplings and tangerine cakes for the feast the following day. Will you be making an offering, grandson? His grandfather asked in a formal tone. I guess so, Lubo responded uncomfortably. I haven't really thought about it. Grandpa Chang held up a crooked finger and wagged it at the boy. You would be wise to think about it carefully if you wish your ancestors to protect you from the others. What others, Grandpa? Lubo asked. Nodding as if agreeing with an unseen guest, the old man finally answered. The Forsaken Ones. They are angry and they seek revenge. Come again? Lubo said, becoming more interested. You mean like ghosts? Yes, spirits who died without family or were rejected by their family. They become angry at the sight of such festivities in honor of others. These spiteful ghosts wait until darkness falls, then roam in search of vengeance on any living being who ventures out into the night. Trying not to smile, Lubo cast a sidelong glance at his father, then asked, And what do they do? His grandfather's tone became ominous. They devour them. He really believes it too, Lubo snickered at Zulai as he told Zulai the story the next morning. They were helping to carry the trays from his family's car to their site at the graveyard. This place gives me the willies, Zulai said with a visible shudder. You don't think there are any of those angry ghosts around here, do you? Lubo rolled his eyes in disbelief. I don't think there are any kind of ghosts anywhere. They're just a lot of very silly people who believe what they've been told. He pointed to the crowd of families gathered into small groups. Those with relatives buried in the cemetery were preparing for the ritual beside the graves. Others were setting out their things in a large central garden. The families whose ancestors were buried elsewhere had taken up a collection to build a decorative pond under a grove of lacy-leafed willows. The pond was surrounded by colorful beds of daisies. Here and there stood stone benches used by some of the older folks to sit and contemplate the meaning of the day. Lubo knelt to place his tray on the silky bright red cloth that his mom had spread on the ground. Zulai's face lit up when he uncovered the food. Whoa, ginger chicken is my favorite, she exclaimed. Your mom is such a good cook. The aroma of warm chicken coated with sweet plum sauce filled the air. Yeah, Lubo agreed, but I would prefer to eat this at home, not in the company of a bunch of corpses. Zulai reached down and plucked some thinly sliced ginger from the plate. A ghost is going to get you for that, she said, laughing as she popped the ginger into her mouth. I guess I better go help my folks. Save me a slice of your mom's tangerine cake. Within an hour, the formal ceremony was over and Lubo joined Zulai at the pond. Along with several other children, she was setting tiny foil paper boats in the water with an offering of a sweet almond in each one. The slowly sinking boats glittered in the sunlight. Did you see some of the things people are leaving here? Lubo observed in astonishment. Some of the bowls and trays look like they are solid silver. I saw Mrs. Yi put out a cup that was inlaid with jade. Zulai barely looked up. Yeah, this is a very special feast, so those who can afford it really go all out. But they'll come back and pick up the things tomorrow when they're empty after the ghosts eat their fill. Now you're starting to sound like my grandfather. It's more likely that mice and possums help themselves to the food. Lubo stared into the water for a moment, then a smile spread across his face. You may have a point, though. What do you mean? If a few trays and goblets weren't here in the morning, the old folks would think that their ancestors had taken them. Zulai twisted her mouth into a frown. Why would the things be missing? Lubo grinned. Because we're going to come back tonight and take them. The girl's mouth dropped open. Are you crazy? Not at all, Lubo said, talking faster as he hatched his plan. It's a great idea. We could sell the stuff and make a lot of money, and the superstitious old geezers would be thrilled that their offerings were accepted. It's not really stealing. We'd be doing them a big favor. Zulai was not convinced. But we would have to come back here at night. I don't want to do that. Why not? Lubo taunted. What are you afraid of? The angry ghosts, the girl muttered, staring at the unattended graves in the oldest part of the cemetery. That's just mumbo-jumbo, Zuli, and you know it, Lubo chided. Look, no one is going to get hurt. Still uncertain, Zulai finally gave in. Zulai let her bike drop to the ground. It hardly made a sound on the soft earth. A half moon bathed the silent cemetery in a ghoulish blue light. She pushed open the low metal gate that was the only opening in the crumbling brick wall. Warily, she made her way to the pond and called out in a hoarse whisper, "Lubo! Lubo!" Suddenly, a figure leapt out from behind a tree. "No!" she screamed and started to run. "It's me!" Lubo hissed, grabbing her by the wrist. The girl was almost in tears. "That wasn't funny," she fussed at him. "Maybe you should just do this by yourself." "I'm sorry," Lubo said, letting his backpack slip down on one arm. "You're right. Come on, we'll be done in no time." The willow trees cast long, grotesque shadows across the burial stones as the two walked to the first grave. Lubo picked up an ebony bowl and dumped out the vegetables it contained. He studied the empty bowl for a moment. "Wow, these designs look like they are made out of gold wire. I'll bet this is worth a lot," Lubo said. "Shh! What was that?" Zulai whimpered. From behind them came a low, shuffling noise. Lubo felt the hairs on his neck begin to rise. "I don't know, but it's getting closer." The two children dropped to their knees and cringed behind massive gravestones. Moment by moment, the noise grew louder. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps. The shadow of a figure fell across the stone. Lubo and Zulai clutched at each other in terror. "What are you doing here?" someone demanded in a menacing tone. We... Lubo stuttered, finding it nearly impossible to speak. The figure moved closer, and as it did, Lubo and Zulai could see it was a boy, a little older than themselves. "Why are you here?" the boy questioned sharply. "You've come for the offerings, haven't you? Well, they're mine. You better leave while you still can." Lubo felt his fear recede like an outgoing tide. It was just another kid like them with the same idea. "Why should we?" Lubo said confidently. "There's two of us and only one of you." "You know that for certain?" the bigger boy snarled. Lubo glanced around. He didn't see anyone else, but he decided not to take any chances. "Hey, look," he said to the stranger. "There's a lot of stuff here, enough for all of us. And this isn't the best of it. I saw a cup over near the pond that looked like it was carved from a single piece of jade." Moonlight shimmered on the still waters of the pond. The boy hesitated, then the corners of his mouth turned up in a greedy grin. Without another word, he sauntered in the direction that Lubo had indicated. As soon as the stranger disappeared behind the trees, Lubo stuffed several items into his backpack, but Zulai didn't help. She was staring toward the oldest part of the cemetery. Her hand trembling, she pointed in that direction. "Look, Lubo," she moaned. "Something is moving out there. It's them!" Her voice quivered. "It's the hungry ghosts!" Straining to search the shadows, Lubo too saw movement. "There's something out there, all right. That creep really didn't come here alone. Let's go," he urged Zulai. Crouching low, they sprinted toward the cemetery gate. Zulai reached it first and tugged with all her might. "It's stuck!" she sobbed. "Let me do it," Lubo ordered, yanking at the thick metal bars. With a squeal, the gate began to open. "Leaving so soon?" The two spun around to face the older boy. His face was twisted into a savage expression. "And taking something with you, I see." With shaking hands, Lubo lifted the backpack up. Here, you can have it. All we want to do is leave." The kid stepped closer and grabbed the pack. Opening it, he reached in and pulled out the ebony bowl. Okay, Lubo said, trying to control his fear. Over the boy's shoulder, he could see the others moving toward them. "You and your friends can have what you want. Now we're gonna go." He took Zulai's hand. With an evil grin, the boy raised the bowl over his head and threw it to the ground. It broke into several large pieces. "We don't want these stupid trinkets," he howled. "They will not satisfy our hunger." Slowly, his body seemed to swirl and expand. Behind him, other phantoms approached, their eyes fixed on the horrified children. "No!" Zulai screamed. "It's true! They're real!" It was the last sound that Lubo ever heard. Don't mess with them ghosts. Don't mess with them ghosts. Let's see what you guys had to say on that. Woo! Oh. Thank you so much, Diane. for your very generous tip. She said, "The spooky, thanks for keeping me entertained on Wednesdays." It's my pleasure, Diane. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let's see what you kids are saying. Morgan Moore, all you can haunt buffet. Shane Migliavaca, ghosts? David Neuer, favors are never without a cost. Uh-oh. Shane Migliavaca, nope, don't steal from the dead. You're asking for it. Shane knows. Tony Marr, steal offerings from angry ghosts. What could go wrong? I know, right? It sounds completely reasonable. Keith Tomlin, I can't wait to become a ghost and be able to eat people. Keith Tomlin then said, on second thought, though, why wait? All right, my friends, I think that tonight has moved to its close. I want to thank you all for hanging out, for listening to some scary stories, for making me laugh, for making each other laugh, for having a great time together. Craig Cohen said cemeteries are top of the list of places not to go late at night. Correct. What's the name of that cemetery out by you, Craig, in Philly? The one that's just gargantuan. Is it Mount Moriah? I can't remember. But anyway, amazing cemetery. But thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I will be back here right this same time on Facebook at 8 o'clock next week to continue reading even more scary stories for sleepovers. So until next time, thank you all for hanging out. Thank you for your generous tips. And thank you for your friendship and camaraderie. I can't wait to see you guys next time. But until then, stay scared, my friends.